transportation systems that really focus on mobility and are not necessarily one person in a car. Think about cars with a 20% occupancy rate, driving at about 15 miles an hour down some of the interstates in commute time. People really want to start looking at how this happens at a local level, what the local economy is. Again, this is not a new phenomenon, but I think that this is something that we're starting to hear much more about at the mainstream. How do we create what Michael Schumann talked about in his great book, 2006, a small mart economy where it was made more of local businesses and local commerce. People are reprioritizing, thinking about what's really important. What is a good life, a well-lived life? What does well-being look like in this time of economic struggle? That it may not be that whole thing about he or she who has the most toys wins, particularly if having the most toys involves a lot of increased debt. We're seeing a lot more of people who are taking up gardening and sewing and knitting and canning, and it's not just women and it's not just people at low incomes. And so that's, I think, an interesting piece of what's going on there, that people feel a need to be back in touch with how they're sort of being more self-sufficient and all of that. And people are starting to find a need to reconnect in a lot of different ways, with families, perhaps, certainly their communities, with the environment, and with others in a number of ways. We're seeing some of that in the social networking that's obviously been going on for a few years, but I think we're going to see more and more ways that people are finding to reconnect that they probably haven't as much as they would say, at least say they'd like. And those three pieces alone, the relocalizing, reprioritizing, and reconnecting, I think are going to start to shape the marketplace into which a lot of you are selling and designing and doing business. And on the B2B side, new normal continues really, being more accountable, being more transparent about everything that companies are doing. Again, not new, but I think it's starting really accelerating. Being more specific about what you're doing about this, what kind of actions you're taking, what are the commitments you're taking, are they sufficient, are they bold, audacious commitments, are they incremental, are they vague, how specific are they, do they have the kind of key performance indicators that increasingly people, whether they're customers or shareholders or other stakeholders, want to see. And how authentic are you about how you're talking about all this? You're putting things in context. Are you thinking about this in innovative ways? Are you being humble about what you're doing and the impact? I think one of the things that companies have been doing for a while is not communicating very effectively and just sort of putting out a factoid, putting out a commitment, and not putting it in context. It's kind of like my saying, well, I ran 5 miles yesterday, which is not true, but if it were, I'd say, you might say, well, that's nice, good for gentlemen your age, but perhaps, what does that mean? Has that been, is that something you do every day? Are you working up to a marathon? Or does this have to do with a larger well-being program? Is this, are you dieting? Have you stopped smoking or drinking or doing something, substance abuse or whatever it is? How does that 5 miles, what does that mean? Without knowing that bigger picture, my little 5-mile jog doesn't mean a lot. And so how do you put things in context so people understand, whether it's your external audiences or your own employees? So that's part of the new normal. And so, how does that affect what you do and make?